Thank you and good morning. That's Charlie. I'm Warren. You can tell us apart because he can hear and I can see. That's why we work together so well. We usually have our specialty. I'd like to welcome you to, we got a lot of out-of-towners here, and I'd like to welcome you to Omaha. It's a terrific, it's a terrific city, and Charlie's lived in California now for about 70 years, but he's still got a lot of Omaha in, and both of us were born within 2 miles of this building that you're in. And Charlie, as he mentioned in his description of his amorous triumphs in high school, Charlie graduated from Central High, which is about 1 mile from here. It's a public school. And my dad, my first wife, my 3 children, and 2 of my grandchildren have all graduated from the same school. In fact, my grandchildren say they've had the same teachers that my dad. Oh, it's a great city. I hope you get to see a lot of it while you're here. Our earnings report was put out yesterday. As we regularly explain, the realized investment gains or losses in any period really mean nothing. I mean, we could take a lot of gains if we wanted to, we could take a lot of losses if we wanted to, but we don't really think about the timing of what we do at all, except in relation to the intrinsic value of what we're buying or selling. We do not make earnings forecasts, and we have, on March 31st, we have over $90 billion of net unrealized gains. So if we wanted to report almost any number you can think of and count capital gains as part of the earnings, we could do it. And so in the first quarter, and I would say that we have a very, very, very slight preference this year, if everything else were equal. Well, it's true in any year, but it's a little more so this year. We would rather take losses than gains because of the tax effect if 2 securities were equally valued. And there's probably just one touch more of emphasis on that this year because we are taxed on gains at 35%, which means we also get the tax benefit at 35% of any losses we take. And I would say that there's some chance of that rate being lower, meaning that losses would have less tax value to us after this year than they would have after this year than this year. That is not a big deal, but it would be a very slight preference, and it may get to be more of a factor in deferring any gains and perhaps accelerating any losses as the year gets closer to December 31st, assuming, and I'm making no predictions about it, but assuming that there were to be a tax act that had the effect of reducing the earnings. So in the first quarter, insurance underwriting was the swing factor, and then there's a lot more about this in our 10Q, which you can look up on the internet. And you really, if you're seriously interested in evaluating our earnings or our businesses, you should go to the 10Q because the summary report, as we point out every quarter, does not really get to a number of the main points of valuation. I would just mention 2 factors in connection with the insurance situation, which I love. In the first 4 months, not the first 3 months, but the first 4 months, GEICO has had a net gain of 700,000 policyholders, and that's the highest number I can remember. There may have been a figure larger than that somewhere in the past. I did not go back and look at them all. But last year, I believe that figure was like 300,000. And this has been a wonderful period for us at GEICO because several of our major competitors have decided, and they publicly stated this. In fact, one of them just reiterated it the other day, although they now changed their policy. But they they intentionally cut back on new business because new business carries with it a significant loss in the first year. There's just costs of acquiring new business. Plus the loss ratio, strangely enough, on first-year business tends to run almost 10 points higher than on renewal business. And so not only do you have acquisition costs, but you actually have a higher loss ratio. So when you write a lot of new business, you're going to lose money on that portion of the business that year. And we wrote a lot of new business, and at least two of our competitors announced that they were lightening up for a while on new business because they did not want to pay the penalty of the first-year loss. And of course, that's made to order for us, so we just put our foot to the floor and try to write as much business, good business, as we can. And there are costs to that. A second factor, well, it's not a factor in the P&L, but an important event in the first quarter is that we increased our float. And on the slide, I believe it shows it year over year, $16 billion. $14 billion of that came in the first quarter of this year. So we had a $14 billion increase in float. And for some years, I've been telling you it's going to be hard to increase the float at all. And I still will say the same thing. But it's nice to have $14 billion or more, which is one reason, if you look at our 10Q, you will see that our cash and cash equivalents, including Treasury bills, now has come to well over $90 billion. So I think I feel very good about the first quarter, even though our operating earnings were down a little. But one quarter means nothing. I mean, over time, what really counts is whether we're building the value of the businesses that we own. And I'm always interested in the current figures, but I'm always dreaming about the future figures. There's one more person I would like to introduce to you today, and I'm quite sure he's here. I haven't seen him, but I understood he was coming. There's I believe that he's made it today, and that is Jack Bogle, who I talked about in the annual report. Jack Bogle has probably done more for the American investor than any man in the country. And Jack, could you stand up? There he is. Jack Bogle, many years ago, he wasn't the only one that was talking about an index fund, but it wouldn't have happened without him. I mean, Paul Samuelson talked about it, Ben Graham even talked about it. But the truth is it was not in the interest of the investment industry of Wall Street. It was not in their interest actually to have the development of an index fund, the index fund, because it brought down fees dramatically. And as we've talked about some in the reports and other people have commented, index funds overall have delivered for shareholders a result that has been better than Wall Street professionals as a whole. And part of the reason for that is that they brought down the costs very significantly. So when Jack started, very few people, certainly Wall Street, did not applaud him. And he was the subject of some derision and a lot of attacks. And now we're talking trillions when we get into index funds. And we're talking a few basis points when we talk about investment fees in the case of index funds, but still hundreds of basis points when we talk about fees elsewhere. And I estimate that Jack, at a minimum, has left in the pockets of investors without hurting them overall in terms of performance at all, gross performance. He's put tens and tens and tens of billions into their pockets, and those numbers are going to be hundreds and hundreds of billions over time. So it's Jack's 88th birthday on Monday. So I just say happy birthday, Jack, and thank you on behalf of American investors. And Jack, I've got great news for you. You're going to be 88 on Monday, and in only 2 years, you'll be eligible for an executive position at Berkshire. So hang in there, buddy.